I think the best scenario is that we kind of remember who we were. We were a republic. We were a confederation. We were these United States of America. And you actually see stirrings of that even now, that there are different states like Texas or whatever that start to say, maybe we should have our own republic. We have that right. That's what the original contract was, right? We entered into a contract with these other states to become a confederation, and we agreed to cede certain powers, but we always had the right to leave. Now that was
The Civil War.
yeah, the
Stop
Civil
that.
War, right, kind of decided in favor of the unitary centralized government. But that memory of of what the United States once was hasn't left us, and sometimes you see it coming back, and especially if the central government, the dollar collapses, and this, because I think the main power of the central government is its economic power. It's that it can send these checks to to state governments. They subsidize everything. So like it used to be that states were semi-independent, even after the Civil War, they're semi-sovereign, and so much of what was done within the state. But then over time, the central government has kind of got its tentacles in, and by subsidizing universities and various institutions and direct subsidies to state governments, it's just that nobody wants to cut. You say, well, if we do something that angers the central government, that angers Washington, D.C., then we're not going to get this money. And it often decides, an issue, a local issue in favor of the federal government's position. But if the federal government loses that power, because the dollar collapses, then everything could change, and we could see a rise of the states. And I think that would be the best thing. It's just that, certain states could break off, other states could, maybe stay with Washington, D.C., whatever. We could have the best thing would be to have some kind of peaceful secession, like you saw in Czechoslovakia. It became the Czech Republic and Slovakia, and not a single shot was fired. And that could have happened in Ukraine, but obviously it didn't. And we're seeing, the tragedy, the alternative, and who knows what would happen in the U.S. I mean, I don't see anything like that happening soon, but things are changing so fast that, I thought I would never see anything like that in my lifetime. But maybe I will. Maybe there will be a real breakdown in authority. That's one thing is that you learn, you think it's easy to believe that these like governments and institutions are permanent. They're like mountains. That's what we used to think of the Soviet Union. It was just always there and always would be there. But they're actually kind of mysterious, intangible things, let's say. It is sort of an invisible glue that holds them together, and it can be very powerful glue, but then one day it just dissolves, and we're in a new reality. And that may happen here. I mean, there's obviously like a growing distrust of mainstream institutions that we've talked about. And that's eroding at the foundations of the central government in this country. I think we're still, I don't see that happening anytime in the near future, a real collapse of authority. But, those processes are at play. I think that again, the faith in those central institutions is diminishing, month by month, year by year, and then some kind of crisis. At some point, we may realize, hey, it's just not there anymore. People don't trust it, and it's gone.
Right. Right. At the end of the day, it is just kind of a confidence game.
Right.
Confidence game in the U.S. dollar, confidence game in our institutions.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't call it a confidence game, but it is based on confidence, right? That trust, and trust is this mysterious intangible. Often we take it for granted, but we really shouldn't. At some point, it can evaporate, and it's just all over.
Right.
You can say that about Syria, is that there was real trust in the government and in the army, and but then it evaporated, and it just, when it did, it happened with lightning speed.
Right, exactly. I was going to bring that up. Just Syria is a reminder of just how thin that veil between order and chaos is. That nobody saw what was what happened in Syria. Nobody saw that coming, right? And just everything. Sure, the there is clearly a rot inside, and I think a lot of people were aware of the rot. People, especially that were watching Syria closely. I wasn't really aware of it because I wasn't paying attention. But people within Syria, and I'm sure people around it, knew that there was rot, and they were able to exploit that. It clearly the United States is not comparable to Syria in any way, but it is in the sense that there is an internal rot within the U.S. and people see it, and there was clearly a rot within Syria, and that rot allowed it to just crumble and just disintegrate in 11 days. And just thinking that there is this rot within the U.S. empire, within Western Europe, and what Syria showed us, it could just all of a sudden people wake up and then chaos just gets unleashed. I mean, that's possible, right? I mean, I hope not.
Yeah, yeah.
And,
No, these things can happen. That's right. I'll just say I'm not going to make any predictions. I don't see it happening in the next few years.
Nobody saw Syria.
Yeah, I know. Yeah. But yeah, things are changing at such a rapid pace. The world has gotten so crazy, and it's also just our elite. Clearly, just it doesn't have the hold. It doesn't have the old deft touch it used to have. It used to be a supremely self-confident elite who, because it was supremely self-confident, could allow for a certain amount of dissent and show a certain amount of tolerance and actually, made it really much more effective. But because I think it's really lost its self-confidence and it's become increasingly, so you see it becoming increasingly narrow and strident and committed to certain ideological principles above all, it's become much more brittle and much less effective. And I don't see any signs that it's going to reconsider its approach. But I think that every sign points to a continuation of that trend, and eventually, I think maybe above all, the elite will self-destruct, through a series of really reckless and ill-considered actions, like potentially a coup or something to save democracy.